Hey, welcome to the channel. I thought I would just lead you through a little bit of the details of a few of the details of this build in just a couple minutes. Just a quick rundown of what we did here, what we encountered. The build speaks for itself. We redid the forks, rebuilt the forks and suspension, went through and built the wheels, all new tires, Pirelli tires, new seat cover, new plastics, new graphics, new handlebars, new controls, new mounts throughout. So that stuff speaks for itself. Some of the things that we dealt with in the engine were the crank was shot, it was out of balance, and the bearings were shot because the crank was out of balance and it wore the bearings out. So all new bearings, all new crankshaft. The cylinder, as I mentioned in the launch video, I knew the cylinder was going to need to be dealt with and get reconditioned, possibly, but basically found that it had already been sleeved, and at that age, I'm not surprised that it had already been sleeved. And it was bored to its maximum capacity. They had ran it out of oil, so basically the question was, can we hone this thing and get it within spec to just put a new piston back in it? We could. We had it within thousandths of spec, and we're able to put a large 65 or 68.5 millimeter piston in it, which is a 265 cc. So able to deal with all the issues in the engine. Ran into a few other little glitches here in the shifter and the shifting mechanism. It wouldn't shift right for a while. I had to go in there and take the clutch out and figure out what was going on there. But we got that all straightened out. From there, it was onto the pipe. This was another major challenge, was getting this all cleaned up, and I think really with a Scotch-Brite pad and a Makita grinder, you can do a lot. So I was able to clean up all the work that I did on the forks and the shock and all of the aluminum here, and to give it that crisp, clean look. Anything that I put paint on, I use that Scotch-Brite pad underneath to prep it really well. Where I could use primer, like on the swing arm, or even these mounts here, was able to use primer and get into that aluminum and get that aluminum epoxy paint that I used to really stick well. Went ahead and went with a painted engine just to give it that real clean look. It's a heavy duty, very expensive epoxy paint. This is not just a chrome paint that you buy, a Krylon paint or something cheap like that. It's a very expensive epoxy paint that I used on the triple clamps, the engine, the swing arm, anywhere you see that aluminum look on it, that I wanted that clean look. And I've made mention to this before, but we aren't going to race this thing, so this is really made to put on display, and this build is to put on display in a local village motocross store. So all new bars, all new cables and controls throughout. Went ahead and reconditioned this brake line. I went with the old brake line because of the way that brake line is designed. It's very hard to put an aftermarket brake line on here. So I went with some heat shrink, some blue heat shrink on that, and the wiring harness coming out of the stator worked excellent to give it that real crisp and clean look. Other than that, it's just all new, as I mentioned before, all new cables, chains, sprockets, bearings where I needed it. A lot of the linkage, suspension linkage, I was able to just grease up and make it go. But all new kill switch, new radiators, new plumbing. Was able to rebuild the carb with a carb rebuild kit. Went through the shock and replaced the rear seal, replaced the seals in the forks, and inspected the forks. Everything actually was in pretty good shape. Went through the brake calipers, rebuilt the brake calipers and the pistons so that everything was moving freely. Got the brakes working really well. And so that's basically what I did with this bike. Reconditioned the airbox here and worked on it a bit. I sanded this tank down all the way to 1200 grit, so I went from 320 where it was really gouged in places and went down to a 400, then a 600, then an 800, then 1000, then a 1200, and was able to get a pretty good look on this gas tank. Went with 91 graphics that came with this piece that covered the gas tank here, so that really helped. But all new plastics, UFO plastics. I think we paid $140 for the plastics kit. We've got between 2,700 and 3,000 in materials here that I used, and all the way from the suspension rebuild to the wheel rebuild to everything all throughout. So we kept the build reasonable and reasonably priced, and from there it was just all my labor. So really pleased with how this build turned out. The frame, I used a heavy duty epoxy paint on the frame as well, and pleased with how it turned out. So a few little bling pieces here, foot pegs, these little clamps, the brake pedal, the levers, the brake lever, and the clutch lever, brand new kill switch. Tried to go new where I could, but really wanted this thing to look like new, and I think we got pretty close. So got to deliver this to Todd tomorrow, and looking forward to seeing it on display. My wife and I drive by there every Friday night when we go to South of Nick's, so it'll be nice to see it on display, and hopefully Todd will enjoy it. Hopefully you guys will get some out of it too. I'm going to give a few clips of the build process, what I went through, what I did, some of the details of the build, and I hope you enjoy it. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you like this channel. I've got a lot of content on here. I focus on the channel is SoCal Honda Build. I focus a lot on Hondas. I built a 87 CR250, a 2004 CRF 250, and then just recently finished a 2002 CRF 450 that I'm actually going to be selling tomorrow. So hit subscribe if you like the content. I'm going to try to keep the content fresh and keep it coming. And I'll be posting a lot of videos probably about this build as well as we go, as I have time to go through the footage and make videos. So stay tuned. All right, well, we are starting the KX250 rebuild project here. Just going to do a quick walk around of the bike. We plan to replace the wheels with gold anodized wheels. I will be rebuilding new wheels, keeping those old hubs and reconditioning those. We're going to recondition the exhaust. We're going to go through the engine, do a rebuild of the engine. We'll do a complete rebuild of the swing arm and all bearings. We will rebuild the rear shock, rebuild the front forks, and all new plastics, graphics. We're going to go through, as I do on every project, rebuild all of the controls, new cables, new brake cylinder, handlebars, grips, clutch levers, cables, and the works. We're going to have to sand and do some work on this gas tank to get it restored, but stay tuned. Well, welcome to the channel, and just wanted to give everybody an update on the latest project we've got going here. I'm calling it Project Cow. It's 1990 KX250, and a little backstory. Guy who owns an apparel shop in San Clemente here wanted to add a KX to his collection, so I located one and picked up this bike within probably 36 hours of us having a conversation, and so here we are. Come to find out, he is a longtime friend of Pete Fox. Pete rents a little area, a little space in his store down there, so long moto history. He's been around the industry a long time, designing and in the apparel business. So looking forward to doing this project for him, this build from beginning to end. We'll have more videos coming out soon, so stay tuned. I'm going to break these forks down. We're going to refinish these casings. We're going to refinish the casing on the rear shock. I've already taken everything apart, but I thought I'd lay the parts out here and show people how I disassembled this. So that's it. We completed the project, purchasing the bike in February and finishing it by the 1st of September of 2021. So went fairly fast. The bulk of the build happened between June 20th and September 1st, and took a while to order all the parts and get everything the way we wanted it. But feel free to PM me if you have any questions. Hope you enjoyed the video.